Good morning. We are close to the end of the long 75-page discourse mimer from the Mittler Rebbe, page 432. 432. The mimer Mika Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi l'Sheves Hamashpili lireis b'shamayim v'aretz, which is based on Alter Rebbe's mimer, Chanukah mimer, that we learned in the Sefer called Torah, a mimer and its biur, its explanation. And all of this is the basis and the foundational source text of big part of the end of Hemshech Hayim Beis, which is our focused class that we've been learning for over 12 years, the conclusion of Hayim Beis. And we're learning this because, number one, to get context, since this is the basis of that, of the ideas that are discussed in Hayim Beis. And secondly, the Rebbe Rashab did not conclude the Hemshech, so we are able to glean and draw from this mimer the continuation of what would have flowed from the Rebbe Rashab, most likely, based on how the Mittler Rebbe concludes the subject matters. And we will get back to that. I've been going back and forth. So let's first focus on what we're learning right now. And the last part of this mimer is concerned with the pasuk itself, Mika Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi l'Sheves, beginning with, started on the bottom of page 422, after explaining at length the idea of a neshama, which is compared to a flame consisting of three parts: a wick, the oil, the fuel, and the fire and light it creates. That in turn is a metaphor for the divine soul as it manifests within the animal soul and turning it into fuel for divine love, fire, the divine fire. The resources that the neshama has to do this transformation is through Torah Mitzvos. Ner mitzvah v'Torah mitzvah too is compared to a ner. We learned at length the correlation between a mitzvah with idea of a candle, also those three components of transforming the material world into a divine will, which is what a mitzvah is all about, and leading to the ultimate experience of Torah, the light of Torah, the undiluted and unfiltered and immutable divine light as it is in the highest levels, to draw down all the way down below exactly as it is above. And then the combination of all these three elements, the neshama, the mitzvah, and Torah. And that led us into the final discussion here of how all this is alluded to and contained in this verse, Hamagbihi l'Sheves, Mika Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi l'Sheves, Hamashpili lireis. And a little more specifically, Hamagbihi l'Sheves refers to Yechudei law, elevating, Magbihi, all the way to the highest levels, which is the Avodah that we do when we transform this material world. Mamata l'mayla Chozer, a returning light all the way to the highest levels. L'Sheves, that Atzmus itself is integrated into the experience and into existence. But that's all the Magbihi. Then there's a Hamashpili to draw it down, which is through Torah, L'Sheves, Hamashpili lireis, the Riyah, B'shamayim v'ba'aretz, both the idea klolis and the idea pratis, that we have the divine manifesting, the divine hashgacha, the Riyah, both B'shamayim v'ba'aretz, and indeed they're all really one, because l'mayla, both deis, kel deis havaya, deis elyon, das tachni, yechud elo, yechud tato, are essentially one. Even though from our perspective, it's different levels and different perspectives. So it comes down to being all like one. And the last piece that we've learned in this context, on page 432, he said, and we were struggling. I think it's clear now what he's coming to ask and explain. What does it mean? Hamagbihi mashpili, Magbihi and shiflus is already al kaponim kamashmaim l'reim, but oretz la'emek. There's already two levels: Magbihi to elevate and mashpili. And here we're talking about a level that's sevel beis deis, that contains both. L'mayla hu m'chinas mayla, which is higher than mayla mata altogether. So he explained, in addition to what we learned earlier, that it's drawing it down into the structure of existence, this higher level. So here he said the kavana kachi shebeshah shemagbila sheves, that simultaneously the pasuk is coming to tell us not that there's two levels. There are two levels from our perspective, but in the very level where there's the Magbihi, at the very simultaneous, the very same level is also Hamashpili. That's the extent. So in other words, even as God is completely removed from existence, he's also part of existence, and vice versa. Like he said, Oz davka mashpil liris, mishum demailo mata shavin mamish. That's why you can't say, to say, for example, there's the state of the divine as it is removed, and there's a state of the divine as it manifests from the point of view of Atzmus. Of this level, you can't make that statement. So Hamagbihi lires, Mika Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi lires, Hamagbihi l'sheves, Hamashpili lires, is coming to say that the very same thing where Hamagbihi is, that's where Mashpili is, and vice versa. So generally, you would think, if you want to go from a general supervision, a general bird's eye view, to going down and evaluating and looking and supervising details, it's like two stages. But that's not how it is. L'mayla b'Hashem. And that's where we, let's see, where did we go to? Did we go all the way to the bottom of the paragraph? I don't think so. I think we
went to Zehu, didn't we? Or did we do that the day before?
I'm sorry?
The sixth line of the new paragraph on page 432. Or maybe that was from the day before, where it says
No, that's what I got too.
No, I'm just looking. Let me see. Yeah, I think we stopped by the end of the parentheses, Yediyah Pratis. Yeah, the sixth line, correct.
Yeah.
We stopped there. Okay, so we'll continue from there, which is what I just summed up.
Which page?
432.
432, when the pages can be found, if you want to follow along, the text that we've scanned it, the PDFs into ayinbase.com. You don't have the book itself. We scanned all these pages there. Now, I'll just add one more point, which I've said a number of times, but I'll say it again. What all this is coming to really emphasize, and this is a critical point, that the ultimate experience that we are going to have is experiencing the way God himself, as close as possible, that a human being can relate to, because, as I said, you could have made the argument that, you know what, human beings are not God, and we can reach maybe even some experience of joining them together, but to state it to a level that we're that Magbihi and Mashpili, with the whole idea that the Atzmus is Lamata exactly like Lamaila, that's a completely exclusive to Atzmus. But as I pointed out many times, Chassidus Chabad is very clear, not just in this Maimer, but in so many places, that the goal is ultimately to get the highest possible experience, not because we want it that way, because Hashem wants it that way. In other words, he wants us to have a relationship with him that the more we make the effort, the more we can access and in some way experience the way it is by the Eibishter himself. Always with the qualification that we are not God. That's a given. But through our bittul and through our Veda, we can assume a godly consciousness, not just the Yichud Tata and Yichud Ilah, but also this third level that he's talking about here. So it brings to mind a famous statement that the Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek brings this, the Rebbe cites it quite often, where he said on the Pasuk, he said, the Tzemach Tzedek writes in Derech Mitzosecha, that we once heard from Rabbeinu HaGadol, the great Rebbe, our Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, that in time of Dveikus, he was in a state of Dveikus, of cleaving, connection, attachment, however you translate it. He said, Mili b'shamayim imcha lecha fatzti. Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Elam Haba, Gan Eden Atachten, Gan Eden Elyon, I don't want your Elam Haba, I want you alone, Dich allein. Which is, of course, most people All people would say Gan Eden and Elam Haba is quite a nice thing to have. It's actually the schar that we get after all our Aved in this world, is that divine pleasure and the connection and the learning and appreciation and understanding of God. But the Alter Rebbe wants himself, God himself, even higher than all these Giluyim and revelations. And mind you, these revelations, the Alter Rebbe understood what they were. It's not like he dismissed them. He knew quite well, to the point that we say that the Alter Rebbe could not even say the word Atzilus. He would literally stutter and tremble. He couldn't even say the word Atzilus because he understood what we're talking about here, such a divine level. So the Rebbe once asked the question, okay, that's the Alter Rebbe. But what about us? For us, Gan Eden is an Elam Haba. Why are we also meant to aspire to that? And the Rebbe's answer, interesting, Yutas Kisel of this was 1954, I should say, Tazayin. So that would be 1955, sorry. Yutas Kisel, the Rebbe said, but that's how we were educated, to shoot for the top, so to speak. That we're not sufficed with even those lowest levels. Now, obviously, we're not the Alter Rebbe, and we're definitely not on the level of Atzmus, but yet, as much as possible, we're having the experience. And if you think about it, also, Matan Torah, which is coming up next week, Matan Torah wasn't just God revealing himself as he did to the patriarchs, which was quite a high level, to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Matan Torah, Anoichi, Hashem, Elekecha, Vayered, Hashem, Al Hasinai. I mean, similar language. And we talked about Matan Torah in this context of Hamagbihi, Hamashpili. That exactly as he is above, he came down below. Vayered, the whole Matan Torah's Atzmus came and gave the Torah to the people down below. That tells you, Ata Hareisa Ladas, as we learned earlier in volume 2 of Ayin Beis. God himself, Ata, Atzmus. That's how the Alter Rebbe teaches. You do Atzmus. Ata, when you say Ata, you're speaking Lashon Neichach in the first person. I say you, not he. Not he revealed himself. You revealed. That means I see you as you're in my presence. That all that is part of this process of the highest levels coming down below. Now, obviously, in our Aveda, each of us has to translate this according to where we are. We have to be realistic where you stand. Like I said, Yehuda Tata is quite a nice high level. Most people on this earth live lives that their interest comes first. God is not part of the equation. Even when God is in the equation, it fits into your terms, not necessarily the other way around. So it's a process of step-by-step process. That's what Avodah is, just like it is with each one of us. We start when we're children, and we go mutfa, murgash, muskul, as we learned earlier in Ayin Beis, ben chamish l'mikra, ben esel l'mishnah, ben chamesh esel l'gemara, and we grow and expand our containers as we grow old, as we grow and mature, and are able to contain higher levels. But here we have these three levels as say benchmarks that help us get to the levels of ultimately experiencing the highest. Magbihi and Mashpili as one, and we should understand that while he's saying it, also recognize again each one of us where we stand in this regard. But the fact is, we say every day in Shema, everybody says, "B'chol levavcha Hashem Elokecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol moedecha." So that immediately tells you that all of us have three levels right there. I'm not saying those three are these three, even though you could compare them based on Ayin Beis. That we may do later when we start comparing the Hemshech to what we've learned here, Hemshech Ayin Beis. But we see from there that we all have a B'chol Moedecha every day. Everyone's Ma'oid is according to where you are. One person's Ma'oid may be another person's B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, as it is with anything. That for one person, what today they understand, what they understand today, yesterday was more of a matter of faith, or the things that they understand, or that for them is faith today, another person has learned to integrate and internalize and understand. So it's a constant relative process based on where you stand and where you are in your life. Okay. So let's continue learning inside. V'zehu, the sixth line on the second paragraph, page 432, says V'zehu inyan hayud rishon. So he's going to come back now to themes that he's discussed earlier, but now he's connecting it back now that we've gone through all these different explanations. So it's like a summation of what we learned earlier, but now we have the whole picture. So he says, "V'zeu Yud of Hamagbihi." So let me just refresh our memories. So if you remember, the question that I asked earlier was why Magbihi is with a Yud, Magbihi, a Yud at the end. It should have said Magbiya. Same thing, Mashpili. It said Mashpil. So he explained that the Yud he explained was the Yud that comes from transforming the Daled Malchus into a Hey. That's that Yud. And the Yud is elevating it all the way to the highest level of the Yud of Chachmei Law, which in turn elevates Magbiya Yud, elevates that Yud even higher than that, all the way into the levels before the Tzimtzum to the highest levels of Elikus. Mashpili, the same idea. And he ultimately explained that the Yud of Hamagbihi and the Yud of Mashpili, even though the Yud of Hamagbihi is elevating it all the way to a Yud, and Mashpili is bringing it down to the last Yud of Adnai, the Yud below, Chachma, the way Malchus is below, yet they come together as one. And that's what he's now going to emphasize. V'zeu inyan Yud of Hamagbihi. So you see, he writes it with like in a quotation mark. Shezeu Atzmei Yud of Hamashpili. That itself is the Yud of Hamashpili. This he said earlier. Bli shinu hamahus klal. So initially, it's two levels from our point of view. But ultimately, it's one thing, like he just explained. Because the same Edlakus, as he is in the highest levels, is the same Edlakus below. Bli shinu hamahus klal. These are words we learned a lot earlier. Leishanisi. There's no shift, no change, no... there's no, it's immutable. And this too we learned. Ani Rishin, remember? Ani Rishin, Ani Achrin. Exactly, I'm the first and I'm the last. The same Ani, that's Rishin, is Ani Achrin. And the Pasuk Ani, Hu Lamayla. Looks like we learned the Ani, where did we learn this earlier? Let's see if I can find it earlier. I'm not sure if I know the page right now. But he brought again that Ani as he is above, that's how he is below. The brackets is a second manuscript, but it makes clear the idea. Ani, who?
382.
382?
Yes,
okay.
The fourth line.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, Ani Rishon, Ani Achin, Ani Esis Ayin, based on Ani, based on. Does he bring also the second pasuk? Ani, I think later in the paragraph, probably. Yeah, there we go. So the Uki Ani, Anihu, Hu Ani. Yeah, he brings both psukim. Right, 382. Good, thank you.
Yeah, and he brings it back on page 430, by the way.
430 as well. Okay. Yeah, I remember a few more times as well. This was repeated. So this was a recurrent reference throughout this mimer, several different places. Good. So exactly as he is above, that's how he is below. Canal. So even after the tzimtzum, as that Ani and as the Yud comes down below, it's exactly as it is before the tzimtzum. Now, from Atzmus' point of view, it's always that way. As we know, the tzimtzum and the parsa don't affect him. It only affects the flow of from the teacher to the student. But the teacher itself is not affected. But here the chiddush is that we are also experiencing it. So Anihu l'maylo, k'maykedim atzimtzum arishin, v'anihu l'mato liyesa l'maylo b'chinas maylo mata kanal. And Anihu, and I'm that same level of Ani, which is also, like we said earlier, ayin, is also lamata, because we're talking about a level that's higher than maylo mata. When you're talking about a level that's higher than any hierarchy of higher and lower, whatever is above is below, whatever is below is exactly as it is above, canal. Okay. So I don't know if anything new was added in these few lines, except that he's again rounding it all out and summing it all up. But this idea was discussed earlier. But here, as I said, he's talking about Hamagbihi and Mashpili as being literally one level. The kol zeh, And this, all this that we're discussing, I think Chozer, not Chozman. Sometimes Chov Zayin could be Chozman. I think it's Chozer. And all this, Hamagbihi, Hamashpili, Biyud, Zel Biyud, the Chachma de Torah. Like we learned earlier, this is the Yud of Chachma of Torah Dafka. Chozer Bereishis mikavaya lekenu Dafka kanal. Okay. Again, very concise. So let me spell it out, what he means here. So you may recall, he said that Yud is Chachma. Chachma is a Yud. Bina is like a Hey. And Malchus is the last Hey, or the Dalet that becomes a Hey. So which Chachma is it? Chachma of Torah. Because Torah manifests, Torah the of godliness, all the way to the highest levels. So the Yud of Chachma, Torah and the connection, Mikavai Lekenu, if you remember, he compared it to Shema Yisrael, Hashem Lekenu, Mikavai Lekenu, that the Yid, Neshama is saying, look at who is Avaya Lekenu. Avaya, the highest levels of Avaya that comes into Lekenu, that has the ability to combine Mashpili, Magbihi, and Mashpili together. This he explained earlier, if you want to see it inside, on page 428 at the bottom. Hashem Elokeinu b'Torah Mitzvos. So again, he's just summing up without the details, but saying, Amikavai Elokeinu Dafke. V'hainu, and the reason for this is, Lefi she'er de Torah, Kelu Beis Madregas, the Yoshor ve'er Chozer Dafke. Okay, maybe let me pause for a moment and just let me give a little introduction here, because he's going now into actually connecting it back to the theme of Torah, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. I know Torah is using here the verse Torah, but it's also the Sefer Torah of the Alter Rebbe is called by that name. So let's not confuse the Sefer from the expression here. So if you may recall, I discussed a while back that when the Alter Rebbe explains Mik Hashem Elokeinu Magbihi l'Sheves and Mashpili l'Ires, he said that Magbihi l'Sheves is through mitzvahs that elevates the world and elevates Stoka Teremim Goy. It elevates the physical world, Magbihi l'Sheves, and integrates it into existence. That's a mitzvah. A mitzvah takes the Malchus and reveals the Yud in it, and Te Magbihi l'Sheves. He said, Hamashpili l'Ires, that's Torah. Because Hamashpili is bringing down Torah into Shemayim v'Oretz, and the Alter Rebbe actually said that Shemayim and Oretz is Torah shebiksav and Torah shebal peh. That's how the Alter Rebbe explained it. The Mittler Rebbe, because he elaborates much more at length what means Mika Hashem Elokeinu, and connects it to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata, and the joining of together of those two, and the Alter Rebbe does not really elaborate on that. Once you learn the Mittler Rebbe, you see that that's the explanation there. But the Mittler Rebbe does, so the Mittler Rebbe was really focused until now, that speaking about Magbihi and Mashpili is Yichud Elah and Yichud Tata, and they're joined together. And here and there he made references to the Yud of Chachma of Torah. But now he's coming back and bringing into the idea that also connects to that in Torah itself, we also have the combination of the two. Because remember, we learned Torah shebiksav and Torah shebal peh was in Torah itself was Yoshor and Chozer. With Torah shebiksav being the Gilim L'mayla and Torah shebal peh that the Chachamim Chazal that they derived through their efforts in learning Torah. Remember Chozer, like Talmud Bavli, through questions and through struggling through pilpul, that they clarify ideas. So similar to how mitzvahs add something to Torah, in Torah itself, there's also two levels. And now he's bringing that back here as well, which, interestingly, is going to help us understand Ayin Beis better. Because remember, in Ayin Beis, the whole theme of Ner Mitzvah Torah and Ner Hashem Nishma Sodam began on page 1350 in Ayin Beis to explain, after explaining Tefillah Malmata L'mayla, now we're going to talk about Torah Malmayla L'mata. So really, it's all coming to explain Torah But once he's explaining it already, he explains Ner Mitzvah and Torah and the Shamas. So the fact that he's bringing it back here is going to help us understand Ayin Beis in the fuller sense of the word. But it is different aspects of the interface between divine and existence, how Neshama does it, how mitzvahs do it, and how Torah does it, and of course how tefillah does it. Tefillah is connected more to the neshama, because the neshama coming from the bottom up elevates the world through tefillah, mamata l'mayla. Mitzvahs, as we learned, is a combination of mamayla lamata, mamata l'mayla, and Torah is mamayla lamata, where exactly as it is above, that's how it is below. And we need all of them, as we shall discuss more in detail. But now, he's bringing it back, and he's saying that this is Chachma de Torah Er, and the Hainel Fisher Er de Torah, and now I'm reading inside. Kelel, Beis Madregas. It encompasses two levels. This we also learned earlier. The Er Yoshor, the Er Chozer, Dafke. Of Er Yoshor, that's the Torah as it's revealed to us. Hashem gave us the Torah. And Er Chozer is how we learn Torah, and we derive different conclusions and different understanding through our discussions, which is an Er Chozer experience. But he called earlier Torah Shebal Peh. If you can find it, I can refer to the exact page. I don't want to right now start looking, but it was a whole discussion earlier about the two levels within Torah itself. Okay. So he says like this now. And in the order itself, Magbihi, Hamashpili, which one comes first? Magbihi is Er Chozer, comes before Er Yoshor. Magbihi is to elevate. Hamashpili is to draw down. So he says, the Er Chozer kedim le Er Yoshor. And the Er Chozer precedes the Er Yoshor, which really seems counterintuitive. Because before you go up, you have to first come down. That's how everything began. First, God was mamshich, to create existence, and then existence, through its avodah, elevates. And yet here, it begins with Er Chozer, with Magbihi. And he's going to explain why. Well, the Yud of Hamagbihi, Yud of Mitzvos. That's why it begins first with Magbihi, the Yud, with the Yud. At the end of Magbihi, the Yud of Chachma of Torah Mitzvos, She'elam Omato, the Er Chozer canal that elevates from below. That's why it begins with the Magbihi. But why? The answer why?
Page
The answer
415,
is-
by the way. Sorry, page 415. If you want to know where it was found before, 15 lines
415.
down. 415, 15 lines down.
Okay. Look quickly there. Yeah. Yep. Good. Okay. So we learned earlier, why does it start with Er Chozer? Because remember, Seif Ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Remember that expression? The whole intention of God's creation, even Mamayla Lamata, was not just to should come down. It was down below in Seif Ma'aseh. When we finish the building, finishes existence, the structure of existence, and then the neshama comes down below and elevates it. That goes all the way back to machshava tchila. Not seifon, not tchilasim b'seifon. The beginning is wedged in the end. So though technically speaking, yes, you could say the Er Yoshor comes before the Er Chozer, but intention-wise, the Er Chozer comes before the Er Yoshor. Because the whole thing starts with Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, Liyisleis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim. If it wasn't for that, there'd be no Er Yoshor in the first place. The whole reason is Er Ein Sof, and as a manifestation of Er Mamayla Lamata, is in order that it should come down below, that we then should elevate all of existence all the way up. That's the whole point. That's why it reaches always the high, Magbihi L'Sheves, reaches all the way to Reima Musa Atzmus, higher than all the Giluyim. So in other words, so the Pasuk, Magbihi L'Sheves, is beginning with the intention, that it all begins with the Kavanah of Magbihi L'Sheves. The Er Chozer. She'elam L'mata be'er Chozer canal. Shemezeh yiyeh ha'elam haba. And all the Giluyim, Elam Haba of the revelations, Mochin l'shifta cholamato kamoy l'mayla canal. And it's through this avodah of Torah mitzvahs below that creates, that builds Elam Haba, which is a Mochin l'shiftacha, like we said, an entity for where he resides and dwells. Lamata kamoy l'mayla, below exactly as it is above. Umizeh. Magbihi l'sheves b'kisei hamalchus l'mayla min ishtalshlus. Like we learned earlier, l'sheves here is not the yeshiva of sitting down and settling in as it is after the tzimtzum, where the king goes out of his inner sanctum to sit on the throne as he relates to his subjects. That's the yeshiva lamata. Here we're talking about mochel shiftecha, Magbihi l'sheves, that the sheves is on the level of Magbihi, meaning all the way in that integration of Atzmus, as exactly as he is above, like he called it kisei l'maylo, the remus Atzmus, b'kisei machz l'maylo min ishtalshlus, hainu, which is higher than the whole structure, hainu, which means b'chinas primis v'Atzmus the Ein Sof mamish canal, in the inner and core of Ein Sof mamish, as we discussed earlier. So again, he's tying together pieces and ideas that we've learned, but he's not tying it all together. Remember, we're coming to the end of the picture, the end of the mimer. So the Mittler Rebbe is bringing all the ideas together here. So that's Magbihi l'sheves. But who mishum, and here he says what I just said earlier, a few minutes ago. The safe ma'aseh b'mitzvos b'kabol sel malchus shamayim eila l'mayla b'pnimis hakesed malchus the Ein Sof canal, because the safe ma'aseh, where do you reach this highest level? You don't reach it in area. Yoshor is already the process of God revealing and expressing himself in expression, the dynamics of creation and of existence. Even the highest levels are all coming to create. Here, the safe ma'aseh of ma'aseh mitzvos and kabbalah sel malchus shamayim, that when we accept the yoke of malchus shamayim, that reaches that reaches eila l'mayla b'pnimis hakesed, in the inner dimension of Kesed, Malchus, the Ein Sof canal. Saying that Kesed Malchus of Ein Sof, remember Malchus of Ein Sof for the Mittler Rebbe, he was referring to Malchus, not Malchus of Atzilus, that goes into Biyah, but Malchus of Ein Sof that elevates all the way up, what he calls now Primis HaKesed Malchus, the Ein Sof. I don't recall that he said the word Primis HaKesed Malchus, the Ein Sof. He alluded to it, but now he's saying it explicitly, because we're talking here about, even though Malchus of Ein Sof also is the level where the tzimtzum takes place, and then afterwards the kav, but that's on its way downward. What we're talking about here is that we're reaching these highest levels through Aveda that reach all the way upward, Magbihi l'sheves, all the way into Keser, Primis Keser Malchus of Ein Sof, as he just said here. Okay, let me stop if there are any questions.
I don't know if we ever defined what that level was called, this high Pnimius HaKeser, but is that like Tehiri Ilah? Did he say that, or am I just kind of imposing that from my mind here?
No, he said the word Tehiri Ilah. He used Tehiri Ilah. Reishim Nusha the mark of Tehiri Ilah. He used that expression. Generally speaking, Malchus of Ein Sof, as I said, is sometimes referred to the level, like the Malchus, as the lowest level of the 10 hidden spheres, meaning the place where Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, like the Zohar says, Golev Galifu B'Tiri La B'Reisham Nusa de Malka. But it could also refer to, when you compare it to Malchus of Atzilus, that our Aveda pierces all the way to higher than the Tzimtzum. And Malchus of Ein Sof, here he's referring to Malchus of Ein Sof as Malchus within his own inner domain before the Tzimtzum. Like he said, Lifnei Tzimtzum, which goes all the way up to the highest levels of what he calls Primis ve'Atzmus, or Keser Malchus. So that's what the Aveda reaches.
You're talking Primis HaKeser. It's always called that.
In Keser of Atzilus is called Atik. Here, we don't necessarily use the word Atik, because it's talking Lifnei Tzimtzum. There's no actual spheres there. It's more just, we're using terms just for us to be able to have a handle on it. So he's not using Atik because we don't, usually Atik and Arich is used more in Keser after the Tzimtzum, meaning Keser of Atzilus. Here, he's talking how it is all the way in these highest levels. And it's a longer discussion exactly how these terms are used. I don't want to go into it right now, but suffice it to say, he's talking about the highest levels here. Now it's called Malchus because at the end of the day, the Eibishter is having, it is a dira b'tachtenim, it is machan l'shivtecha. He's dwelling in his inner domain. Basically, he's sitting on the throne all the way in Primis Atzmus is how it is in tachtenim. He's not sitting on his throne in Atzilus or in Bria. he's talking about sitting on the throne as he is from the highest levels, because Seif Maisa b'machshava tchila. So when we build a Beis Hamikdash lamata v'shachanti b'seicham, that's the level he's talking about here. As Atzmus resides, dira b'tachtena, dira for Atzmus b'tachtenim, in the lowest of levels is where we do the avodim. That's the Chozer of Magbihi l'Sheves, as we learned earlier. Just in the Rebbe Rashab's Memorim, you're not going to find this language so much. Malchus of Ein Sof, reaching Primis Kesed. The Rebbe Rashab's language would usually be, this reaches Etzem Ha'er, or even Helam Atzmi, or even the highest levels that are higher than all Giluyim. The Rebbe Rashab uses more language like that. The Mittler Rebbe will use Malchus of Ein Sof, Keser, Primis Keser, even Lifnei Tzimtzum. It's just, his language is more that way. The Rebbe Rashab uses far more, I'd say, broader, not such defined terms to talk about these same levels. Okay. If there are no other questions, I'll continue. So next he says like this. V'zehu ner mitzvah. Okay, now he's bringing it back to ner mitzvah. Remember we said ner mitzvah? He said has a mila even over Torah because a mitzvah transforms this world. No matter la mila. So this too we learned earlier that it's through tzedakah tereimim, reimamus, elevated goy, the nation below, the Yidden, through tzedakah. Like we learned before that mitzvahs are all called tzedakah. Tzedakah is the general name for all mitzvahs. So this is a pasuk from the actually the bracha when they built the Mishkan. This was the bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Aaron, "U'maisi yedenu keinanei aleinu." Moshe kosa b'staka tekeinanei chinas kein ubosis l'kisa elyon kanal. So he brings another proof that Maisi Yadenu, which means our Maisim, down below, Seif Maisa, our actions below. The word Kainaneo means to establish, from the word like Yesod and Bosses. Kain here means ubosses, from the word establishment, establishing something, a strong foundation, Likise Elyon Canal, to the supernal throne. So there's a throne where the king has a throne, he sits, as I said, he relates to his subjects. But then, through our Maisa Mitzvahs, through our actions below, through our Tzedakah, Tereimim Goy, we create a powerful foundation upon which Elikus or Atzmus can reside and dwell in a Dira B'Tachtenim. So all this is the process of a Hamagbihi l'Sheves. So see this piece, like I've mentioned a number of times, the Mittler Rebbe often will add a few more points, even though he discussed this topic earlier. So he's adding a few more verses, but it's essentially consistent to what we learned earlier about Hamagbihi l'Sheves. And specifically, I'll just refer you to the page where he spoke about l'Sheves, why it's called l'Sheves. That was on page right here. The bottom of page 4626. Magbihi l'Sheves Yeshiva Zeh Mahi. So he explained there at length, relatively, what this yeshiva accomplishes. So if you really want to understand what we just learned, I would complement it with looking at page bottom of 426 and page 427, where he discussed more in detail this process that we just learned. But this is all Magbihi l'Sheves. Now he goes back to Hamashpili Lires, Mamayl Lamata. This is Chozer. It says, "Va'acher halo zu de Chozer." And after we do this avodah, this elevation from the bottom up, ba'atzmis mamish, which reaches all the way into the core essence. So then he says, "Misham dafke, mashpili biyud." From that very highest level, not from the level of not lower levels of Eir Ein Sof, but Mamish Misham Dafke, Mashpili bi Yud of Chachma the Teira Eir, he descends in the Yud of Chachma, of Teira Eir, that comes after Ner Mitzvah, Lahoyer Lamata Mata Dafke, B'chinas Eir Yoshor, to radiate and illuminate below, all the way below, Lamata Mata, the lowest levels, B'chinas Eir Yoshor, in a way that's a flow going from the top down, Shehilach v'nimshach mamayla lamata, that extends and transmits and expresses from the top down. So you have here essentially a two-way flow. We are elevating to the highest levels, but we want it to be integrated into our existence. So therefore, this itself, that very highest level, that mitzvahs and our aveda lamata, safe maisa, reaches, doesn't remain up there. It then is drawn down through Torah Eir all the way below, exactly as it is above. And here again, he's going to qualify, because here it sounds like, again, you're talking language, mamayla, lamata, higher and lower. Didn't we say earlier, we're talking about levels that are higher than my lamata? So he now says exactly that. Ve'ein ze maylo mata mamish. At this point, it's not a level of higher and lower hierarchy. Ela adraba, k'moshu yizbarach lamayla b'bchinas Atzmus hu shemeir v'nimshach al edetera lamata. So we are speaking the language of higher and lower because that's the language that we exist in and that we relate to. And it begins with Maila Mata because the mere fact you say Tachtenim and Seif Maisa means it's a lower level. But the process here is that once you reach this level of Atzmis and God, the Kavana of Atzmis, Kavana Atzmis, then you're reaching a level that's truly higher than Maila Mata. And Adarab, on the contrary, the way it's above, that's the way it comes down below. Canal. Like we learned earlier, and I mentioned before, like it was by Matan Teda, exactly as it was above, it came down below. Mishum Demailo Mata Shovin Mamish. Because higher and lower are literally equal. The Ein Sof canal. When we're dealing with the levels of the inner and core of Ein Sof. Ad, to the extent Shemach mezeh, that due to this, mishum da'ateirim, at shemach mezeh, mishum da'ateirim mokel ishtalshalus, gam be'ishtalshalus the save of malah ha'inyan kenu. To the point. Trying to read exactly the meaning of the words. At shemach mezeh, due to this, mishum da'ateirim mokel ishtalshalus. Okay, what he's saying is, that since Torah is the Mokkah V'Ishtalshalus, because remember, it's Takel Baraisa Bara Alma. Through Torah, God creates existence. So Torah does come down and relates to existence, like we learned earlier. Even though Torah itself is rooted higher than all than the highest levels, but it does descend to create existence. That's why there's a level of Torah that relates to the Asar Ma'amoris, the 10 statements that God makes in the Torah that creates existence. Yehi Eir, Yehi Rakia. And since Torah is Mokkah Ishtalshalus, but now we've reached a level of all the way, the highest levels, because through Aveda Chozer all the way to the Etzem, and that's Nimshach in Torah. And since Torah is the Mokkah Ishtalshalus, so therefore it causes that also Ishtalshalus or Seva Mala, where there is a hierarchy and a structure, that there too, in the very structure of Milo Mata, should experience something that's beyond Milo Mata. So the initial process of creation, Bereishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'aretz, you can say very clearly, God created heaven and earth. He created higher and lower. The Torah itself is the blueprint that defines the structures of existence. That's creation. But then through our Aveda, when we elevate and say, this creation is all part of us transforming it into a home for Atzmus. So it's no longer just God creating existence. We're going all the way to the Kavana Pnimius. Why did God create all of existence? In order for us to come through Torah Mitzvos and Kabbalah Seil, Malchus Shamayim, Chozer, Hamagbihi Sheves, and create a Dira B'Tachtenim. Once you do that, then the flow then into existence also transforms existence to become something that's beyond existence. That's essentially what he's saying here. So it's not just we get elevated, as I said, but we draw it into existence. And Torah in here clearly is the interface of doing so, because the Torah is both connected all the way above, but through our avodah of Torah mitzvahs, ner mitzvah and Torah and Torah being an that's undiluted, and now through the avodah that we reached all the way to the etzem, all that draws it down, that existence itself. Even Seder Ishtalshel should also be on a level that experiences that which is beyond time and space, or beyond higher and lower. In simple English, I would say the following. I'll just use an example. We've talked about this example. A father, in his great love for his child, builds him a mansion, builds him a home, builds him a palace, a mansion. The purpose of it is not just the child should live there, but that the child should use this opportunity to transform the mansion into a home for the father, meaning a place that the father feels comfortable. The child here, of course, is the neshama. So God creates existence, this world, that's the mansion, and he sends his special child, into this world and says, live in this world, but not just a place for you to live, but transform this material world, this mansion that I gave you, into a beautiful garden, into a beautiful home, into a Beis HaMikdash. Let's call it what it is, a mochen l'shivtecha. V'shachanti b'secha. So what's going on here? If you look at God creating the mansion, so there, of course, he's using divine energy to create, but the divine energy is a limited flow. Creates doimim, semeach, chai, medaber. Talk about all the delights of this world. So there's mineral, there's vegetation, there's animals, humans. It's a world. It's a world with many species and many dimensions. So yes, there's divine energy there, but it's a divine energy that's subject to tzimtzum, what we call the 6 days of the week. Then comes Shabbos, and now Shabbos is meant to be the day Vayechul HaShamayim that we're reaching, that through our avodah of 6 days in the week, of refining ourselves and refining the world through our work, Sheshes Yom Tasem Malachtecha, we now elevate the world to what it was meant to be, a home for God. So then what has happened? That this child, or the children, the neshamas down below, have turned the mansion into a home where God feels comfortable to reside in. And obviously, L'asad Love will be in a permanent fashion. So what has happened now? You've now revealed far deeper than the energy of the divine to create the mansion. You've gone all the way back to the very source of why God created it. To the very pnimius v'atzmus, like he says here, of Ein Sof, or we would call the deepest pleasure, and tainug and ratzon ha'atzmi, of why he built this building in the first place. He didn't build it just to create a nice world. It's a beautiful world. It's and it's tev, or tev moed even. He created a beautiful world, but it doesn't come to the beauty of when we're lasis l'sakin, when we repair the world, when we elevate it, and we fulfill the very purpose of why this building or why the structure was built. But then we are accessing, and that's the Magbil Shevas all the way to the Etzem. We're elevating it all back to the way it was meant to be, and that in turn will draw down Torah, like he said, Hamashpili liris, to transform the world. That the world below, even the very structure that was first created in the 6 days of the week, should also be permeated and saturated with the Atzmus, the Pnimius Atzmus of the Kavanah Pnimius in the purpose of it all. So in a sense, you could say, Hayem La'asesam, today, before Mashiach comes, our work is in transforming the world. From time to time, we have Shabbos' Me'in Elam Haba, we have a taste, and we have an experience on Shabbos and Yom Kippur, on Yontif, and different times, where we say we have some type of experience of a higher state. But L'asad Love will be the permanent, when we'll be able to join both the elevation of the entire world to fulfilling its kavanah, bachel l'shivtecha, magbil l'sheves, and also drawn down mamayla lamata, exactly as it is above, come down below, to have it all down in this world, that this world experiences that pnimius and atzmus ein sof, which is essentially what means dira lo yizbarach b'tachtenim, a home for God in this world, a home for atzmus in this environment. That's in putting it in language that we're more familiar with, especially in the Rebbe Sichos and later Maimonim. But that's essentially what the Mittler Rebbe is saying here. Okay, so we end this paragraph, and I will stop here. Let's take any questions.
I have a question. I don't want to hog up the time. I don't know if anybody else has, but just going to the 6 lines up when he talks about after this elevation we do by Torah Shabbat Pen, the Chozer Atzmus mamash mishum davka Hamashpili be Yud of Chachma the Torah. When he says that we're drawing down the Yud of the Chachma of Torah, I see. In other words, we are by interpreting Torah, we're drawing down the Yud of the Chachma of Torah, bringing in God's light.
Where did you see about interpreting Torah? He didn't say that.
Well, that's my question. The Or Chozer was our work from below you. We talked about I think Torah Shabbat Peh.
Yeah, I just mentioned it just to explain what he's saying here, but he's not talking about Torah Shabbat Peh. Here he's talking about the avodah of Torah mitzvahs in general from the bottom up.
Right. Okay.
It may include also Torah Shabbat Peh. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. But that being said, that we're doing that from Torah. Torah provides that as a source. So you would think it starts with Torah and not with our avodah. That's my question. But here he's saying, I guess
he explained earlier at length, the whole purpose of Torah is Talmud Gadol Shemevi L'Dei Maisa. The purpose of Torah is to instruct us. The purpose of Torah itself is to instruct us to do Maisa mitzvahs, safe Maisa b'machshava tchila. So that's why he said earlier, if a person learns Torah and doesn't do mitzvahs, he's not fulfilling the kavan. So the whole point is that we should do our work. That's why it begins with the process of our avodah. The avodah itself, yes, includes learning Torah and understanding what to do and how to do. That's a separate issue. Here he's talking about the 2 steps of our avodah mumata l'mayla, and then the Torah draws down that highest levels of avodah all the way down below. So it's not a contradiction that the fact that we look into Torah to do mitzvahs as well. That's fine. That's not necessarily relevant to this pasuk. In Magbihi L'Shevis, he's focusing on what the purpose is. The purpose is to elevate existence. The process of elevating existence is doing mitzvahs. He says Torah mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs go together there. But then there's another thing. The function of Torah as a hamshacha from the highest levels down below that comes after the avodah, to draw down those highest levels down below.
Thank you.
Now, he said this more or less earlier as well, just in different language. You could say even that the Torah Shabbat Peh, he did say earlier that without Torah Shabbat Peh clarifies. If you remember, he said that Torah Shabbat Ksav is like a blueprint, and Torah Shabbat Peh is like a working document that you could actually build with. So you could say that's also part of this process, that the Chozer of Torah precedes, so to speak, the Yoshor of Torah, not in order of learning, but in order of kavanah, of intention. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I would just like to make a comment and say that I thought that your shiur from last week, I just listened to it last night on the Parsha, was really wonderful. Thank you.
Which one do you mean?
At the kollel.
Oh, on the curses?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we'll stop here at the bottom of page 432. We ended the paragraph, literally the last line of page 432. And we have 2 more pages to go. And then we'll bring it all back, Ty and Bays. Okay, we're moving along here.
I have a much more general question, Rabbi. And this has to do with the structure or the very institution of a Hasidic mimer. And here, this is a great example. So he took a pasuk, Mika Shem Elokeinu Yilu Shabbos Hamashpili Liros, and
Right.
he generated a 74-page mimer, where he essentially, arguably sets up a framework for the whole structure of our I won't say structure of reality, although it's related to that, but for all of our avoda and the purpose. How does the upper world relate to the lower world, and das elyon, das tak? I mean, he sets up. He brings so much chassidus into one mimer that he derives from one pasuk. And my question is, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Meaning, he used that pasuk to give this over to us. Meaning, what he's telling us is emes, Torah's emes, and he's giving us the chassidus, even the Kabbalah in some places. Of course, because it's based on Kabbalah, but you know what I'm saying. He gives us all this foundational knowledge of the essential metaphysics of Jewish metaphysics. And he uses that pasuk to explain it. Or is it that pasuk, contains that wisdom, and he dafka pinpointed that to say, oh, look right here, it has the whole structure embedded in one sentence. I don't know if I'm framing the question correctly, but is he using the pasuk as a launching pad to give over the wisdom, or is he giving over the wisdom because he's drawing it out from the pasuk?
Oh, I would add one more thing into the equation, that the Mittler Rebbe is basing his mimer on the Alter Rebbe. So let's put it all to context.
Thank
The
you.
Alter
Yes.
Rebbe established Chassidus Chabad, and his Maimorim are all structured around psukim, around verses and around Maimor Chazal. And when you learn it, you come to realize that the psukim Maimor Chazal themselves have many dimensions. There's pshat, remez, drush, and sod. So you could ask the same question about the Gemara in a way. Is the Gemara basing it on the psukim, or does the Gemara understand the concept and uses the psukim to derive from? So the answer, of course, is based on the psukim. So the pasuk itself can be read literally, pshat, and you learn Rashi, and Rashi gives you the literal interpretation. Then you can learn the same pasuk and learn it with remez, whether it's gematrias or things that it alludes to. You can learn it al pi drush, which is essentially the Gemara, the Hamiletic, and you can learn al pi sod. You take a pasuk like Bereishis bara Elokim Shemayim v'Saaretz, it has thousands of interpretations, and they're all lie in that very verse. And some of them are literal, some are remez, some drush, some sod, kabbalistic. You have the 10 spheres, the Zohar says, are alluded to in the pasuk. So it's not that there were 10 spheres. The pasuk includes all of that, because remember, the Torah is the blueprint for existence. The Torah is God's wisdom, and God's wisdom is multi-layered. So the answer is basically with all Torah Shebaal Peh. Torah Shebaal Peh is drawing it out from the Torah where it lies in a more, I guess you could say, in a more latent form, and it's not yet been revealed. But Torah b'pirusha nitna. When Moshe was learning Torah with Hashem, Hashem explained to him some of the interpretations, explained to him the methodologies of how you draw out from verses. So the Arizal says in every interpretation of Torah, there's 600,000 explanations al pi pshat, 600,000 remes, 600,000 drush, 600,000 sod. That's pretty much, that's 2.4 million just in every word or every letter in Torah or word in Torah. So point being is, it's all there because you're talking here about a divine blueprint where God concentrated all of his wisdom, well, not all, whatever he wanted to concentrate into this Torah. To the point that even in the Aleph of Anochi, in the beginning of the 10 Commandments, everything is included in that Aleph. And then it expands into Anochi. Anochi includes the entire 10 Commandments. The entire Ten Commandments include the entire Torah, and the entire Torah includes the entire Torah Shabbat Peh. So essentially, I would say is the following: the Alter Rebbe in Chassidus Chabad revealed a whole new dimension called Chassidus Chabad within these psukim, and it is all originating there. You need a master like him, like the Alter Rebbe, to know how to read the pasuk and how to interpret it properly. So for many of us, we need to learn the understanding of it. Then we go back and say, that's what the pasuk really meant. So did David HaMelech know all that we learned when he said Hamagbihi l'sheves and Hamashpili lira? Would he know all the 75 pages of the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer or the Alter Rebbe's Maimer? So lav dafka. Just like Moshe didn't know, even when Rabbi Akiva was learning, Rabbi Akiva said some things that Moshe himself was not aware of. Because Moshe was teaching Torah, and the Torah includes so much more that can be revealed. And that takes time for it to be revealed. I hope that answers your question.
Very much so. Thank you.
It's like the Alter Rebbe himself in the Akdome to Tanya, he's adding
Shibim ponim l'teira, yeah.
And he ends lokel goimer olai. And it's known that the Alter Rebbe, when he was learning Tanya, and he was asked why is he learning Tanya in order, he said that right now he's seeing new things that he did not think about it when he wrote it. Lokel goimer olai. Hashem is putting the words that are including even things that were not including originally.
Yeah. I would go a step further. When we try to explain these Maimorim, like right now, I'm trying to explain what we're learning here. My goal is not to give you my take on it or interpretation, but to try to understand what he's saying, and hopefully that that what I'm saying is mechuvan and is aligned to the intention. So when, let's say, we take Chassidus applied and we take an idea and apply it to our lives, the optimal goal is that it shouldn't be just our application, that this is actually the teaching we're preserving the integrity of the original, but we're applying it to our lives. Now, sometimes we're human beings, we can make mistakes, or we could say, this may be an application, maybe there's another application. But the truth is, even when we're learning it, we're also trying to make sure that it's aligned with the initial kavanah. That's why you'll find times someone can take a piece of a maimer, they can explain it or apply it, and then if you go back, you say, 1 second, that's not really what the kavanah was in the maimer. It may be a nice application, but it's not necessarily flowing directly from the original. That's part of the work of really learning it properly and trying to say that what we're saying and understanding and applying is actually the kavanah intention of the Rebbe in his saying this maimer. Yeah. Okay, good.
It's like atomic when you said every word, every letter. It's like an atom, that can just have infinite energy.
And when you split the atom, or through fusion or fission, you can release enormous amounts of power. Unbelievable, yeah. There's actually the expression, hipatish yefetzet sela. It talks about Torah and its different interpretations, like patish, like what's a patish? When you strike a stone, yefetzet sela, so the sparks fly.
A flint. You mean like a flint?
Kipatish is a patish is like a
hammer,
like a hammer or anvil. When you strike a piece of metal, or you strike a stone very hard, and the sparks come flying from all sides. So it says that about Torah, that when you learn Torah properly, it's kepatish yefetzet sela. Like a patish that causes the sela as a stone, yefetzet is that it should like split into, you pulverize it. So what happens is that all the different particles come flying from all directions.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice analogy. Before you turn off the recording, I just wanted to make a announcement for the
go
Life
for
500.
it. Please go
So
ahead.
just as some people know, others may not, Rabbi Jacobson is about to complete 500 episodes of his famous My Life Chassidus Applied show, which he gives every Sunday night. And as most of you know, if you've listened to any of these shows, he answers any question you can imagine, talks about any topic you can imagine. And this is a great accomplishment on his part over, I suppose, over 10, 12 years, he'll tell us. But he's trying to raise $500,000 in honor of reaching the 500th episode. And the campaign has begun. And I am proud to say the Iron Base team is in the lead of all the other teams that have come together. And we've raised over almost $6,500 so far. And anybody, I want to thank the people that have given, Yuval and Tzvi and George, Elisheva, several others. This is a great time to donate. Go to mylife500.com. You can find the Iron Base team.
Could you post it in our group so that we don't have? Can you just post the link and so that we can just do it from our, in our chat?
Yeah, for sure. I just did it.
Repost it. You did post it before, but yeah, thank you.
Not posting it again. So please give now. The campaign ends in 5 days. Let's keep Iron Base team the flagship of Rabbi Jacobson's efforts. He puts so much time into our classes. If you think about it, how much value you get out of these classes every day. What would you be willing to give to sit in this class for an hour? Multiply that over a year. Give a fraction of that, and it'll be a bargain. Anyways, please give from your heart. This is a great accomplishment, and enable him to use this money. He's gonna put everything he's put in the shows. He's gonna try and generate written compilations. So indices. You can go any topic. You can go find it, but that takes time and effort and money. People. That's what the money is going to be used for. It's not just paying for people's salaries that are already doing work. Is to create new content to spread the light of Chassidus to the whole world. So please give and give generously.
Thank you so much. And I second that, of course. Thank you. Appreciate it very much, Yitzchak. And thank you all of you that have given. And yes, indeed. We're actually working on a few interesting projects, trying to use AI to excavate all this content so people can easily generate, find answers or direction in any topic that they come up with. So we're working on things already, and hopefully spread Chassidus to the widest reaches and outskirts of this world. So thank you, Yitzchak. Thank you, everyone. So as I said, I didn't even stop the recording yet. Let me stop it at the bottom of page 432.